I'm Vic Schoenbach, and today is Saturday, July 13th, 2019, and I'm sitting here with Curtis Jackson in his house, in Curtis and Ethel Jean Jackson's house on Crestwood Drive in Chapel Hill. And we're going to be having a conversation about his life story and about Ethel Jean's life story. So, thank you, Curtis.
I thank you for coming and asking questions. You probably will hear things I haven't even thought of in years. Because when I came to Chapel Hill, we had been in South Florida for about 10 years before coming here. And so we had been working in the public school system in Pompano Beach. And then when I stopped working in the school system in Pompano Beach and in Hollywood, Florida, I worked for a major appliance chain in Miami. And my wife always wanted to come back home. And so after 10 years, I said, okay, we'll just go back, okay? So we made that transition to come back here.
So let's start with where you were born now,
Okay.
before we jump to
Well, I was born in Waycross, Georgia.
Waycross, Georgia?
Waycross. And
Waycross.
Waycross. Because people used to say, I know you're from Waycross, Georgia, but Waycross, Georgia where? The name of the place is Waycross. That's where, if you were traveling north, south, east, and west, the ways cross in Waycross, Georgia. It's 105 miles south of Savannah, Georgia. I used to tell them 105 miles almost from Plains when Carter was president. I used to use that. But it was, people knew Jacksonville, Florida as a landmark. So I could tell them that it was 74 miles north of Jacksonville, Florida. So most people could lock in who had never heard of Waycross before because they knew where Jacksonville, Florida was. So that was a plus in trying to get people to understand it. Well, yeah, I was born in South Georgia. I was born in the era when segregation was the way. And as a kid, I used to ask questions about that. And of course, your parents try to make nonsensical stuff make sense. And I'd wait until they finished with their explanations, and I would say, but why? I'm sure they got tired of that. But my parents understood the perils that we could go through, you know, being black families in the white South. And I didn't understand that. Racism didn't make sense to me. Segregation didn't make sense to me. So as a kid, I asked some questions about it. For instance, in the 5 and dime store, they had the signs and they said colored, white. But at the corner was a water fountain. And in the water fountain, I could see as a kid, it was running from a common spot underneath. And so I went to the white one, and my mom got really upset. And I said, why can't I drink from this one? It's coming from the same place. But she understood that I did understand, so she tried to make that nonsensical stuff make sense. But because I had been taught to read at an early age, I read stuff that I asked questions about. And people were not ready to deal with those questions. And I remember at the time when Talmadge was the governor of Georgia, and I heard things on the radio that I couldn't even believe that people were saying on the radio. But see, there was no thin veil that they had to operate. You know, they just come right at you, you know, with whatever it was. You were a nothing person as far as most people were concerned. And I used to wonder, well, we took the newspaper across the Journal Herald. And if you can picture this, I used to wonder, why is it that they can advertise in the paper all these jobs, but they didn't mean you? they never considered that. I mean, I figured as I grew up, I qualified for some of those things. And I used to tell my friends, I said, I read about this in the Herald, and I went down to see about this job first thing in the morning, and it had already been filled, even before, no, that was.
So what year were you born?
I was born in 41.
In 41, so when was this that you were looking for jobs? Would have been-
When I was like 14, 15,
So 1955,
yeah.
about.
Yeah, and I was always looking in the ads, but things that you clearly could do, you were not even considered for. And I grew up with this thing, it made me really angry that this could happen. And nobody could do anything about it. Like, I would hear about cases where people were going to court and it was going to be an all-white jury. And we knew how that was going to go down. Black people were going to get time. It was just a matter of how much time you're going to get. That's what it was. But that builds up something inside of you to have to cope with that kind of stuff all of the time. And the city that we lived in, Waycross, was the county seat in Ware County. So people from all around came there on Saturdays. And it was interesting how we were admonished to, if the white people walking down in a group, to step off the sidewalk. So I didn't want to do that deal. And my mom, who was in charge while my dad was, off working, made us understand that you could get really hurt, because she would cite people who had gotten hurt. So, you said, okay, I won't do that. But it was interesting, the things that you learn to cope with. For instance, as a kid, and I remember this so well, you'd go to a store and you'd be told, don't put your hands in your pockets while you're in the store. I got pockets in my trousers, why can't I put my hands in? But then my mom would have to go through that and explain that. And I remember one thing stood out in my mind was I was a youngster. We went to a soda fountain, and at the soda fountain, you could get this double dip of ice cream on this cone. And I was a young child, and my hand was on the stool. And the lady told my mom, he can't put his hands on the stool. My mom was so upset, but she was cool. She said, well then you would eat that cone of ice cream too. And she turned around and walked out. But there were things that I
She said that to the woman
who was saying
telling you that.
I could not put my hand on it. But crazy kinds of stuff. And one of the stores they had trained a parrot to say something about black people. And he was sitting in this room in the store, and he would say it. And once I heard that, I told my parents about it. And my mom told me never to go in that store again. And of course I didn't go in there. But they steered us around stuff because they knew the potential.
So what did your parents do?
My dad worked for the Atlantic Coastline Railway. My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
What was he doing for the railway? Was he porter or
Switchman.
switchman?
And he told me a story about one of he sued the railway.
Really?
Yeah, and it was in court a long time, but he won eventually. And I think about that because being in school and having to write out the stuff for him, he would tell me what to say and I would write it out. And we got an attorney. But most of the people who were his friends who worked there did not want to do that because they didn't want that to affect their job stability in any way. And my dad didn't quite feel that way. You know, he was a risk taker.
So what did he sue about?
Discrimination in some areas that they had really overcome, but you could have the law, but the good old boys determined how that law was going to be interpreted. And I remember in the railway, the last car on the train, usually was real. The people who were black, even if you worked in that last car, you could not work in the front part of the car. You had to work in the back part of the car. And so there was a thing, a process in that where a person who had longer tenure could pull, so if he were laid off, he could pull somebody who had less tenure, take that person's job.
Seniority.
Yeah, seniority, that's what it was. And what happened in that particular case was that there was a man who worked in that car, who was a white guy, who worked in the front part of the car. But when my dad was laid off, even though he had more seniority, he couldn't pull that guy because that guy worked in the front part of that. And so that kind of stuff played along all of the time.
And he was a switchman.
Yeah, he was a, he had had different jobs on the railroad.
Okay.
Okay. The switchman, I don't know if you've seen this, when the cars are changing tracks and sort of thing. Again,
My father used to take me to watch the switchman changing things in
okay.
Baltimore.
Okay, all right. So
I love that.
Yeah, but that was something that we would go and watch him at his job. But coming up in Waycross, Georgia, we had the opportunity to see some things that really we had to be protected from. Because you were black, there were just certain parts of the town you were not going to walk in after a certain time. And if something happened and they accused you of doing something, you were guilty, whether or not. But I grew up in that town, and there was a large black population in Waycross at that time. So that was something that I think was a plus in that environment. But you knew who ran the town. And because I would read the stuff, like I told you, I learned to read when I was quite young. I would read things happening. And my mom really didn't want to discuss some of the issues because I would say, well, I read this. And so basically what they want you to do is just to be quiet about issues. Because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where they will come against you. They had an expression for black people who knew a lot. They had a special name for it, and I just call it quite a few times.
That's something you can say on camera, or?
No.
No. Okay.
We'll skip that one, but
You can write it out for me.
Okay.
So your mother, her job was essentially trying to keep you and your family safe.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially, did she have a job that she earned money from also, or?
No. It was a job and a half, really, to actually shepherd those boys.
And do you have brothers and sisters? Brothers or sisters?
I had 3 brothers.
3 brothers?
Yeah.
Are you the oldest or the youngest?
I'm the oldest.
The oldest?
I'm the oldest. And what it was clear that if you were black during that time of segregation, they were afraid you might get killed or you would end up in jail. That was the way the system was.
Still the same.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. And I didn't understand the rules because it didn't make sense. They tried to explain it to you, but never made sense. Just like it doesn't make sense today. And so I finally told my 3rd brother, I said, and this was after we were adults. I said, I have been some places out of this country, and it's not like this every place. I say, we might consider doing dual citizenship. Spend six months here and 6 months in some other places. But as I travel, I just realized that slavery still exists. It's just called by other names. And what I realized, how the media can control the thinking process. They buy space inside of your head, so you process the things you think about what you were bombarded with in the media. But if you can extract yourself from that and get outside and say, this really doesn't make sense, And because if we had been groomed in a way, we could have been well off financially. But when my dad tells me that his dad was a sharecropper and explained to me how that worked, he couldn't pass certain things on to me. I used to hear my white friends say, after they finished school, they said, oh yeah, I took a year off to find myself. Well, if you didn't find yourself when you got out of school, when I was coming up, you could forget it. You better find yourself in the next few weeks. That's just the way the system was. And what I started realizing after a while was that the stuff that I had been reading in the books, I want to know, let me find some black authors who came through some of these times. Because this is a skewed perspective of a lot of things. And what I came to realize was that white people couldn't jostle hats. As a part of being black, you had to learn how to jostle hats, and see, the white people never had to deal with that. And I just think how, if you didn't learn to do that, how you could never get your family to come through. But what I attempted to do, what my wife attempted to do, is to steer our kids in a direction where they could make better decisions. But even at that, you find that inherent in the system, it's built for you to fail. That's what the system is. Because when I started, for instance, when I read the Compromise of 1877, and I realized,
You mean the Atlanta Compromise, Booker T. Washington, that you're referring to?
the compromise where between the South, the North and the South, and they came together. Basically what they said, okay, they did this behind closed doors. But the decision was, these are black people over here. So what we can do behind these closed doors, we can make these decisions so that, we can, North and South can profit from this decision. In other words, what we can do, if you let our person come through and become president, that's what the North is saying to the South, because the electoral votes from the South.
Oh, that's what you're referring to. Okay, I was mistaken in what I assumed. Go ahead.
The South had the advantage there. But going behind closed doors and making that decision, the North said, okay, we're white brothers, so this is the deal. We'll take our military people out from your states, and there were like about 5 southern states. And you can put your people back in, just like you did during slavery. You can put them back in. Well, that's what happened. And as a result of that, what happened? Jim Crow laws, the black codes, the Klan started to rise. Black people who had come up to be put in place in the government, taken out. Because you had nothing to undergird you. So I began to see what was happening from segregation to, quote, desegregation. Those are just words. You know, they didn't really do a lot.
So you read the paper, you must have been reading about when Brown versus Board of Education was decided.
Oh my goodness, yes. I asked my teacher, I said,
You were in school then,
oh, I
right?
was in school, I was in, yeah,
High school?
yeah, I was in high school, 8th or 9th grade, somewhere along there. And I had read in Life magazine, I forgot who, Earl Warren was chief, chief justice here. I read that. I said, this is Mickey Mouse language. We'll move ahead at all deliberate speed. I said, that better. We don't want to do anything, we don't have to do anything. And I started realizing this is the way this deal works. I learned that really early, that whatever the city, because number one, they control the resources, they made the rules. So what were you going to do? To whom would you turn? And when I started reading stuff in textbooks, then I knew I would be surprised. But here, you know, this is what they want to feed us. And so I started really trying to divorce myself from some of that stuff and just deal with the things that are crucial to know, you know, rather than letting all of this stuff just, because a lot of my friends, more than becoming angry, I think they became militant. And I saw being militant, this could be a lose-lose, because I just quickly started learning this is how the system works. And when I looked at the Ivy League school, you know,
The what? The
Ivy
Ivy League
school, and I started realizing how all of the stuff that they're telling people is institutionalized. There was a guy, and I forget his name right now. He won a Nobel Prize in physics, and because of his prize, you know, if you have a Nobel Prize in physics, you must have something going. But he started writing a lot of racial stuff. And this is one thing I learned about things that are written down. Once things are written down and people start quoting it, you know, in different places, it becomes gospel. And people start believing it. Whether it makes sense or not, people believe that crap. So, he wrote a lot of stuff. And I started tracing back along the continuum to see who finances this kind of stuff. And there are some, well, I won't even talk about some of it, but there's people in positions of power and authority. I look at the little organizations that their parents and their foreparents really established and they finance. All these things are financed by somebody. And like I say, once this stuff is written down, it becomes gospel. And so when somebody else writes a stupid thing, they just quote such and such saying this. And you just have to be careful that you don't let them get inside of your head. Because these are people who plug your eyes out and fill the sockets with dung and tell you you look better without it. And you have to realize that's what they do. And how do you teach your kids? How do you teach your kids to be around it? Like,
so you grew up in Waycross, and you went to high school there?
I went to high school there, Center High School.
Southern?
Center High School. Matter of fact, when they integrated the schools and started getting rid of black teachers and all the paraphernalia from the black school, they trashed, you know.
That happened while you were still in school?
No, that really happened when I got out. But my brothers, I had brothers coming right behind me. They were telling me all the things that started happening there. And you just have to teach people, your kids and your younger brothers, how to steer clear of things. Like I told my grandson, I said, you have to realize that no matter what they say, you just have to watch what they do. Because they have a license to kill you, okay? So that's the truth, no matter what they say. I said, that's the reason there's a disproportionate number of us incarcerated. I say, so be careful, don't give them any lip, and stay clear of certain situations. Now here's this particular grandson.
The dentist.
The dentist. Very proficient on the piano. And he had this job playing the piano in this hotel. And he and some friends went out after they finished playing. And when they were out, they were stopped by the police. Told him, you know, he's dressed.
He's been playing the piano in this hotel.
He's been playing the piano. Now he's dressed. Okay, but now they're going to visit some friends. And the police tell them to fall on the ground. And he told me that the police put a gun to his head. Why? I mean,
this is Georgia?
No. This is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, less than 3 years ago. Okay? So we're not talking about things are changing. There are no really drastic changes. They could have shot him and the police would have been protected in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
And he was a graduate of
the
our school of dentistry here at UNC.
UNC, yes. So once you understand that this is how this system works, you have to prepare your kids for this. Because when they become spokespersons and they think, well, we have arrived, hey, you still have to walk this line so that you don't get in a situation where they can get you on some crazy kind of, because they're going to back up the police. And
did the police apologize later, or?
Did this law apologize?
So
No.
they didn't take him to court, did they?
No.
You didn't.
What happened, they were near the place where they were going to go and have a party, and it was an integrated party, so a lot of his white friends came out to see what was happening. And so only when that happened, you know, did it take a turn in the opposite direction. What had happened was that it said that somebody had broken into somebody's home, and it was a black guy. And so if you lied, you should know who was there.
So it could be he.
Yeah, that's the deal. So I didn't have to explain that to him. See, I had explained that to him many times before, just like I did my other grandsons. But I let him be the person to tell other grandsons that part, because he understood exactly what I'd been telling them.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So even though, you know, we've gone from the time of the segregation in my hometown to being in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, you know,
Where we've had a black mayor,
where we had a black mayor.
as you know, who was born in Georgia, actually.
Yeah,
Grew up in
right,
Georgia.
in Georgia. And we just had a black president. See, it's like a game of chess, but they own all of the chess pieces. So they can put you in checkmate at any point, and once you understand that. And this is what I realize is that because they control all of the resources, they can buy off people. They can buy off black and white people. So you have to be cautious when you really understand that. Because it's so entrenched in the system. It's a systemic thing that all this stuff is in the system. And I wish I could say I've seen really remarkable changes. I've seen some changes, and until this administration came into existence, a lot of things operated just below the veneer. But then all you have to do is listen in this administration, the words, and it gives people the opportunity and the option to do things that they were doing 50, 60 years ago. For instance, I could not understand when I saw that the Supreme Court of the United States overturned this thing about the voting thing on the state level. When they overturned
You mean
that,
the gerrymanders or the?
or even they were
Or the-
gerrymandering, yes, but there was a time when on an annual basis, there were reports that states made, to show that they are.
Oh, the compliance with the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, when
Okay.
they said we don't need that anymore because the states are now complying.
Oh my goodness, it took no brilliance at all to figure what was going to happen in a few weeks. And just as I knew, boom, 6 states, boom, 22 states, they took it back. So, if the present administration were to be dissolved today, it would take 150 years to really get some of that stuff straight again. Because I lived through stuff and I saw how it worked, or I saw how it did not work. Yeah. So it's been an interesting thing, to have the experience. And I try to get younger people to understand so that you can make better plans. I just wish that if I had had a mentor to tell me and show me certain things, I would not have made some of the mistakes I've made. I could have been in a position probably to do that dual citizenship thing, and take my kids to other environments, because we had an opportunity to actually go to the Cameroon, and I would be chief of party. But I didn't understand the politics of that situation. I didn't understand that the AIDS mission person in the country, who was white, wanted his wife to have that position.
Wanted his wife?
He wanted his wife to have that position. Now, mind you now, the black people in the administration wanted me to have the job. 3 of them came over and interviewed me. The University of North Carolina School of Public Health, I had already been, I had passed through that. But that man was the last person to sign off on that assignment, and he said
And he was where?
he was in the county.
But
He worked for the government.
he was in USAID or?
Yeah, AID. And he said, well, in the official papers, it said that the AIDS mission person has to be at level 4 French. Wow, I was at level 2 French, and I knew people who were not even at level 2 but they're white, And he said, so I cannot sign off on this assignment. But if I had really understood that, maybe I could have worked around that somewhere, but I didn't. So here we are, 2 weeks before departure time, and we have to make other kinds of decisions because we just snatched out of that. But I had helped her with a grant in another situation, and they told me in that particular situation, that was the General Baptist State Convention, that if I did not go out of the country, they would like for me to conduct that program. So I did that for 10 years.
So let me really catch up to this point, because we've skipped over a whole
Oh,
lot.
yes, okay.
So you graduated high school, that was like 1958?
1958.
And then what did you do? Did you spend a year finding yourself?
1958, when I graduated from high school, I went to Florida A&M. I played an instrument, so I played.
What did you play?
I played saxophone.
Oh.
So I played in the It's called the Marching
The Marching
100.
100.
Yeah, because after you spent some time there, you had to be fairly good to get in the band, okay? And so they had you there like 2 weeks before school started.
This was Florida A&M
Florida
as the
A&M.
Marching 100.
Okay, Marching 100. And I made the band. Yeah, I'll never forget that whole process. You have all these, there were no ladies in this band. This was all guys. And so they have you practicing for 2 or 3 weeks before school starts. And then there comes a day when they say they're gonna shake the tree. So the section leaders have this legal pad, and they started calling off names. And if they call your name, that means that you get out of line, you just go to the side. Because all the people who are left standing, which would be 100 people, that's the Marching 100. So I went to A&M, and I got a degree in English, minor in journalism.
In English and minor in journalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to do a double. I was going to do one in French, because I'd done well in French. But I was not going to stay there an extra semester just to have that codified in the system. But it was in the system that I had done that. That was the reason when I got the first job, and I taught English. When the French teacher left, they put me in there to teach French.
So you taught English, and then they also had you teach French?
French.
So where was that?
That was the Pompano Beach.
In Pompano Beach?
Yeah,
Public school?
Yeah, it was Blanche Ely High School. That's where I met my wife.
Really?
Yeah.
So Ethel Jean.
I met Ethel Jean.
And she was Ethel Jean Riggsbee then, right?
Ethel Jean Riggsbee. The kids would say Miss Riggsbee. But
So she was a teacher then?
She was a teacher there.
What was she teaching?
She was teaching what was that? Where you're doing all the exercises and
Physical ed.
She was
phys ed.
Yeah, she was a. I said, Jean, how did you get a phys ed major and a fine arts minor?
At Bennett, right? At Bennett.
At Bennett. But she was good at the fine arts part. I mean, she did the physical ed stuff and taught them. But I used to watch her teach the kids. And she was really dedicated to really seeing kids, develop. But we both worked there, and we got married. We got married soon after we met each other.
So what year was that?
62. December the 25th, 1962.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah. And when we got married and came back, she still talked about wanting to come back to Chapel Hill, even though we were down there in Fort Lauderdale. We moved to Fort Lauderdale and we were teaching there. But having the experience, though, of going through starch segregation shapes your perspective of a lot of things as to what you have to do, not just for yourself, but for those that you shape their lives too. And,
So Florida didn't have starch segregation then, did it? Or did it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even Pompano Beach?
Even Pompano Beach.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this was 62, so this was after Brown versus Board of Ed, but it was before the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah, before the Civil Rights Act was instituted. And it was, the people.
So was the high school you taught in segregated? No, it was not a segregated high school, was it? Or
yeah, it was a segregated.
It was, even in 62.
Yeah, and I left the school system before Ethel Jean did, and Ethel Jean, also before she left, worked in integrated high school. And that was just, I never taught in an integrated high school until I had an experience in North Carolina where I was asked, to teach in an integrated high school setting. And it was so different from what I experienced, a lot of the rules changed. And then I realized, hey, I don't think I ever want to have as a full-time thing teaching in the school system like this, because I saw how the racial thing had shaped things, how people thought about things, and because racism is so entrenched in everything, like I say, always just watch what they do. That's what you do. Forget what people are saying. But the thing that gives me a better feeling though is that all of the people who are white don't think like that. And so you see that there's the opportunity to get some things changed. But the people who are in control of the system, they're like that, and they know they control the money, they know they control the rules. For instance, when I sit down and I look through, because I read a lot of the stuff that's coming through, and I see how the rules are being shaped, I can tell you how something's going to come out, because just look at our Supreme Court. There are going to be some things that are going to remain the same. And I just say, when are we going to get to the point where people can really understand that we have to get along in this society? And like that guy said, can't we just get along? Because it's, I wanted to take you there, but I learned some things spiritually about this that I had never known before. It's a whole different dimension that people should be acutely aware of, because we live on that dash, and then it's over, and then we go into another dimension with, we're not in time. So that's the whole thing. You and I can have a conversation about that alone, just that what I learned. And I learned some things that were fairly spectacular, that nobody had taught me before.
You mean after we die? I mean, when you say the dash, you mean our lifetime?
Our lifetime is the dash.
Okay.
Yeah. But what I really learned is that there really is a supernatural existence. And a lot of people don't believe that. A lot of people they're so successful in this dimension we call time, space, and matter.
Mm-hmm.
They really don't believe in anything. If you make $1 billion, what do you care about what happens afterwards? But see, what they don't realize... Until afterwards. Because it's not just a long time. It's eternity. And people don't believe that. I said, oh, that's going to be a sad thing when they transcend this dimension off the dash. And I was so glad I learned that. And so glad I had supernatural experiences to make me acutely aware. Whoa, suppose I had the same thought processes I had, for the first 50 years of my life,
Well, we might want to come back to that, because I would be interested to talk to you about that. But let's go on a little bit more with the story.
Okay.
You're teaching high school.
Yeah.
You married Ethel Jean. You and Ethel Jean got married, and then you left the school.
I left the school.
Go into business.
Went into business, and they really taught me well in business.
So explain business, because I just said that, but I don't actually know details.
Yeah.
Don't go away from me.
Okay. Well, what I did.
Don't go away from the camera. That's the key.
Okay. What I did was this: when I went in and I worked in this major appliance chain. I think about
so what were you
this.
doing with it?
Well, I was.
Why did you apply? Well, you were teaching school.
Well, what I realized, I was not making enough money teaching school And I was told by this fellow who was an insurance person, told me he had been offered this job, and it was definitely paying more than the school teachers were making. And so I went and I interviewed for the job. I left Fort Lauderdale, went to Miami, interviewed for the job, and this man right here, Hunter Rhodes, told me to come back the following day. I guess they had discussed me overnight or during that day, and he said, based on the things we've seen and heard from you, we want to hire you to see how you work out here. And I was